Hello again, YouTube, and welcome to Emergency Podcast with me, Nigel Goodwin.
And me, Captain Biggles, by the look of it. It's coming on, I bet.
I could say a lot worse. I could say a lot worse about what you look like, but it's all good. It's all good. Yeah, we'll go with Captain Biggles for today. How are you doing? How are you doing, Ian?
Apart from the moustache growing longer and the days are getting colder, yeah, I'm fine. But it's for everyone out there, I was practically demanding that we record this episode so quickly after the last one because it has only been a couple of days. Because once again, in emergency podcast land, politics is having yet more crises. I mean, massive, massive crises on both sides of the Atlantic, and it's fantastic.
It's brilliant, isn't it? And so much so that we're going to struggle probably to get through everything. But I did want to start, Ian, on a serious note. I actually wanted to say sorry to our listeners. I wanted to make an apology because unlike some news agencies out there, not that we're really a news agency, but unlike some news agencies, the likes of GB News and Sky News and the Daily Mail, we do believe that if we make a mistake, we should clarify and we should rectify the situation. And on our last podcast, I did make a mistake. When we were talking about Keir Starmer's popularity, or lack thereof, I mentioned that he was the most unpopular world leader. He's not the world's most unpopular leader. Surprisingly, I mean, I don't know how, but there are in fact two other world leaders who are more unpopular or less popular than Sir Keir. One of them, whose name I have already forgotten, Petr Fiala of the Czech Republic. He is the Prime Minister of the Czech Republic. He's sitting on minus 55%. In terms of popularity. Can you guess who the world's most unpopular leader is?
Ooh.
Is
it Donald Trump?
No.
It's not, of course.
He's actually, because it's so divided. It's so divided there, isn't it? There's a lot of people who love him.
The guy in Germany whose name I've already forgotten, who seems to have come in.
Good guess, but no. Even he's even more popular than Keir Starmer, which is hard to believe. It's Emmanuel Macron.
Yeah.
Emmanuel Macron. And this is awful. I mean, it's hard to believe just how bad it is. It's like he is sitting on minus 66.
Ooh.
Minus 66. Now, I will caveat my apology about Keir Starmer with just saying that Keir Starmer has only been in power for a year and a few months. Petr Fiala has been in power for 4 years. Emmanuel Macron has been in power for 8 years. I'm pretty sure they weren't this unpopular, a year and so in. So
let's put it into some context though, because you're right. Keir Starmer hasn't been doing this for very long, and he's basically the world number 3. Well, just before coming to record this, I just watched 18-year-old Luke Little become the world number 1 in darts, and he's been on the tour for a smidge under 2 years. So by the time that Keir gets to a smidge under 2 years, maybe he'll be world number 1 as well.
I mean, you've got to root for him. Right, you've got to root
Absolutely.
for him. But I genuinely hope that because we know he's an avid watcher of our show. So I hope that this news that he's not the world's most unpopular leader, he's actually just the third most unpopular, will maybe give him a spring in his step tomorrow when he goes into work to figure out what he's going to do. But like I just said, Keir, whatever you do, just take the apology. That's what you should do. I apologize. I've said sorry. You don't need to sue us for $1 billion, all right? You don't need to do that. And
talking about suing people for $1 billion, it's not $1 billion. It's now $5.
It's 5 now, isn't it? Sorry, it's $5 billion. Yes. Shall we talk about our favorite? I was going to say our favorite American president. I don't think he is, but our favorite current American president.
Look, the circus over there just gets worse. And when you're at the point where he has turned his attack on Marjorie Taylor Greene, right, who literally launched an entire range of artisanal tinfoil hats for the level of conspiracy batshit craziness that she was willing to say on behalf of President Trump. The fact that he's now abandoned her, thrown her under the bus and then tried to run her over a few times is astonishing. And she's saying this, look, I went all in on you, but what I want you to deliver is what you promised you would deliver when we went all in, which is the Epstein list. Because the entire premise of MAGA was that there's this terrible, awful government and bad people conspiracy, and we're going to unveil it. Well, it turns out he can't unveil it because he's on it.
Yeah, and look, in the interest of balance, we know that there's going to be a lot of people on it. We already
Sure.
know people. We're pretty sure Bill Clinton's on the list. We know that probably Bill Gates, and there's all kinds of other, people who would probably be considered lefties by the MAGA right. But that's the reason why they should be released, because this is about holding truth to power, right? It
Yep.
doesn't matter what side of the fence or the divide you fall on, and it's blatantly obvious why he has been doing everything in his power to distract attention. If he does not take a wrecking ball to the west wing of the White House next week, I will be very surprised because because he needs another distraction.
Look, you had the relative absurdity, frankly, of the Democrats caving over the government shutdown. I mean, they literally just wussed out and got nothing back for it. But conversely, of course, as soon as Congress resumes, you immediately get back onto, so what about this vote to release the Epstein list? And you had the new Congresswoman from Arizona who was then sworn in. So she became the vote that gets it over the tipping point where it will definitely then pass. And now we're at an avalanche of Republicans saying, actually, no, it does need to be released. Yeah. The suggestions about it might get to like 50 or something like that in terms of those who are going to vote the other way. So it's absolutely now going to happen. And the challenge for Trump is he can't cajole and threaten anymore. He can't basically say, toe the party line, I am the party anymore, because people have kind of got the sense that not only is this going to come out, but when it comes out, it's going to be pretty brutal. So it feels like he's starting to lose control of his own movement. How exactly has he managed to do this? And of course, the answer is because of what he knows. Did you see any of the emails that were released over the last few days, Mr. Nigel?
They are comical. They are comical to say the least. They're eye-opening. They're eye-opening in a way, but they're not eye-opening for anyone who kind of knows Donald Trump's past, right? To a certain extent.
Bill Clinton's.
Or Bill Clinton's, for that matter. This is why we want them released, right? Because
absolutely,
there's a lot more to come. I just find, and I know we were talking about it before this, but I find the shock that some people have that Bill Clinton and Donald Trump might have been good friends just bizarre, because it's all well documented. Donald Trump was a registered Democrat back in the day. He was genuine besties with the Clintons. He gave millions of dollars to Hillary Clinton's New York campaign. It shouldn't come as a surprise, but it does, because I guess people have very short-term memory.
Well, people have very short-term memories because, quite frankly, like, we are into the bit in the 1984 novel where they start talking about the party asking you to disregard the evidence of your eyes and ears. Yeah. This is where Trump's fascism has now got us to, where people are literally saying, forget what you saw and what you heard. That definitely didn't happen. It's fake news. I mean, the whole fake news thing being shouted at forever and ever was to condition people to the point where you could literally say the sky is green and they'd start trying to defend the fact that it was green rather than blue. Because that is the level of programming that we've now got to. And it will be the same. Whatever comes out, when the Epstein files do get released, and they will, you are still going to have, the absolute, I don't want to say hardcore, because there'll still be millions and millions and millions and millions of people who are going to be wanting to believe that it's all a fraud, that it's a fake, that it's not real. And that is the point where, look, for me, the $5 billion, just to kind of bring this back full circle, this isn't even about, do you like the BBC or do you agree with the license fee or any of those things. What is under attack here is truth, or as you put it, telling truth to power. You cannot have it where the people in power are able basically to just openly lie to you, and then you go, yes, you're absolutely correct, the lie is the truth. Yeah. You're telling the truth. Why are you lying? This is the level of lunacy that we're now in. So where Marjorie Taylor Greene gets, is now getting death threats and all of the rest of it, it's from the people who've drunk the Kool-Aid and literally will believe anything that they're told by their Führer. That's where we've got to. And it should worry people.
Yeah, because look, it can be, look, we all do this, right? It can be hard sometimes to admit you're wrong, right? When you've invested so much time and energy into something. We've all done it, right? I believed in Nick. you know, or agreed with Nick. That was the line. Was it? I agreed with Nick.
Everyone agreed with Nick.
You know, and I am still, shivering at the thought that I was well in on that in 2010. But the fact is, we
I
make
voted for
mistakes.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Ditto, ditto. I was, sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
But a lot of people, and look, a lot of people do struggle. They do struggle with the idea of, when you're so invested, and also because we've, to bring it back to the pain that people are in, the suffering that societies all over the world are going through because of cost of living crises and everything else. People are desperate, and so they're turning to someone who's offering this fake hope. And then it becomes very hard to turn away from it because the alternative, sadly, is to go back to the status quo, which also wasn't working. So I get why it's hard, but yeah, people to a certain extent they need to suck it up and accept sometimes you're wrong.
So sometimes people get it wrong. People are desperate. They're looking for the next hope. Angela Rayner. Sorry. And before like anyone goes, huh? The exciting news again overnight, and this is why I was demanding we've got to record today. That as it was described, Angela Rayner is installing phone lines, is the way it was described for her forthcoming leadership bid, which is gloriously 1990s, because you don't install physical phone lines into a property anymore. Everything's virtual. But Angela Rayner is absolutely on it, and I'm reading the article here where her team have basically said that she is going to renew her public profile over the coming months and would likely run in the future leadership race. Well, when they're already going and measuring up the curtains and you're still in there, that's usually a bad sign, isn't it?
Yes. I mean, look, we've talked about this a few times, and I know that. Oh, there we go. I had a feeling this would be coming out because it is. We are into popcorn season now. It isn't just Oscar-worthy movies that are all starting to come out now, ready for the big run. There, it's also get a new prime minister time apparently because hey, it's the 2020s and that's what we do. We change prime minister constantly. Rayner coming out is an interesting one. It's interesting because, well, for a few reasons. One, because she is immensely popular within the Labour movement. And again, remember, it is not the British people that elect a new prime minister during this kind of a period. It will be the Labour membership, of which there are less than there were. I don't know how many anymore, but there are less than there were when Keir Starmer took over. But I think that is important to people like Wes Streeting because there's always polling on this kind of stuff, right? And you'll have seen some of this where they put the various potential new leaders up against each other in terms of popularity, and generally Wes Streeting comes out on top against Shabana Mahmood or Yvette Cooper or Bridget Phillipson or all these names that loads of people who are watching going, who? Generally he comes out on top. He gets his arse handed to him by Angela Rayner, okay? But what's interesting, and I think the reason why there's so much manoeuvres, the second reason why everyone's moving so suddenly, not just because Keir Starmer's team decided to shoot themselves in the foot the other day, but
In the head.
In the head, yeah, because they're worried about the King in the North. They're worried about Andy Burnham because.
Hang on, Clive Lewis, the Norfolk, not also one of the, I think Norwich South or something, has already come out saying that Andy Burnham needs to be put back into Parliament so he can become the next Labour leader.
Yeah, and so there's manoeuvres going on there. Now, it will take time for Andy Burnham to get there because he needs a by-election. Someone would need to stand down. The rumours are that they are trying to find that person at the moment, and there are people willing to do it. So you can understand why Angela Rayner, Wes Streeting, people like that are moving a bit quicker now. Because, again, I mentioned Angela Rayner absolutely wipes the floor with Wes Streeting. You throw Andy Burnham into that mix and all the polling says Andy Burnham absolutely beats anyone in the field right now. And this really blew my mind, and I think it shows just how divided we become, how kind of black and white divided we become, kind of you're either on this team or another. We've talked about unpopularity, the popularity level of people. All of the names I've mentioned have negative popularity ratings right now. Some of them, it's a little unfair because, as I mentioned, most people don't even know who they are. So actually don't know is the bigger number for someone like Bridget Phillipson, right? Now, Andy Burnham is the
So
only. Sorry.
hang on. Before you move off that, you've just said Bridget Phillipson, and people don't know who they are. Isn't she the one who lost the Labour deputy leadership contest? So somebody who's so popular
Yes.
that she lost heavily in her own party election.
Yeah, yeah. But hey, it doesn't stop them. They all want power, right? It doesn't stop them from trying to get back in. But no, Andy Burnham is actually a frontline politician, not just Labour politicians. Andy Burnham is the only one with a net positive rating. It's +2. Again, there's a lot of don't knows in there, but he's the only one. Even Zach Polanski's in the negatives. Even your guy, even our favourite bungee jumping leader is in the negative. Only just, because a lot of people do like it. But that, it shows the power of, well, I guess social media right now in terms of how it has divided people. It's like if you don't support someone, then you have to be completely against them, and so it makes it hard.
This is, for me, and this is why I'm going to keep waving the popcorn, right? Because we are reliving the glory days of the collapse of the Conservative and Unionist Party. Mm-hmm. Okay? Boris Johnson, who won a big majority in 2019, a big majority, had big popularity ratings, divisive, but people liked him because they thought he was funny and all the rest of it. But then obviously COVID demolishes all of that. You get all the parties and so on. The Tories were literally the snake eating itself for a year and a half, where the entire political focus wasn't on trying to govern the country, which, coming straight off the back of COVID, had some big problems, just as we have big problems now. But the focus wasn't on the country. The focus was on the various preening peacocks who wanted the leadership and therefore to be Prime Minister. I mean, you're talking about, Bridget Phillipson, and we've mentioned Andy Burnham and Wes Streeting and Angela Rayner, and my brain is immediately shouting all of the Tory names at me when we kept going through the same process. We're less than, have we even gone past 18 months yet of this government? No. What was it, 4th of July? No,
July,
so we're still inside 18 months.
Yeah.
And we're already here where basically authority has collapsed, discipline has collapsed. Did you see the Wes for Leader webpage, which had been created and then cached, but before it was cached, somebody had actually managed to screenshot it? These people are already at it, which is exactly the kind of nonsense that you used to have with the Tories. So I'll shut up. But look, in a very, very, very early episode, we talked about, is it continuity Sunak? And I said, with respect to it, Labour have turned into the Conservatives. And this, for me, is just more proof of it. Yeah. They're practically indistinguishable at this point of just being an utter waste of time. Don't any of them realise this?
I've thought about this a lot, and I do, which shows how sad my life is, I suppose. But I think when they're in the bubble, I think obviously they all have aides and advisors, and the truth is a lot of those aides and advisors are brown-nosing. That's what they're doing. It's like, look, I'm not saying that they don't do important work, but very few of those aides and advisors will be constantly going up to their person and going, you're wrong, you need to do this. They will be very carefully managing them, right?
Yeah.
And they do surround themselves with yes people. Trump does it. Boris Johnson did it, and as soon as he fell out with someone, they were out the door, even if they were a very important aide. We've talked about Morgan McSweeney for Keir Starmer. The talk is that McSweeney already has his own list of who he would like to replace Keir Starmer. Who he would prefer. His preference now is Shabana.
I'm assuming that Mr. McSweeney still envisages himself to be at the heart of Downing Street.
Well, obviously.
Yeah.
Obviously, the kingmaker, it's like, because that's what it all is. It is a bit of a game for a lot of the people in the background. They're all jockeying for position. The thing that concerns me, though, and if you're good to move on from Labour slightly, it's just that we talked about this a bit before in terms of the chaos that the collapse of the Tories and now the collapse of Labour does bring. We're enjoying, well, you're enjoying popcorn. I don't have popcorn. I only have wine. I'm sorry, I'm showing my middle classness today.
Rather.
But It's been a day. What can I say? But the problem we've got is that there's no obvious front runner, right? There's no obvious party to replace. And we can talk about reform. Yeah, we can talk about reform being up ahead in the polls, but they're not true front runner status because they're not polling in a way that would guarantee them a clear victory. And if anything, they feel like they're going backwards. And we've talked a little bit about, obviously, Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage's popularity, he's minus 33. Right, he's minus 33. That is terrible for someone who wants to be prime minister. All this stuff was said about Keir Starmer before he became PM, that he was the most unpopular opposition leader to be about to become prime minister. Nigel Farage is there right now. This is a real problem when you look towards a general election. And one of the things we said about reform when they won all those council seats not 6 months ago, or about 6 months ago, and they won various councils up and down the land, was, well, we now get to see how they operate in positions of power, and it's not gone well, right? No. And it's not gone well. It's not been because they've had hard lines or anything. It's gone badly because they have, just like the number 10 operation, they just keep shooting themselves in the foot and the head and everywhere else. And the one that popped up for me today was Cornwall. So Cornwall is a bit of a kind of three-way marginal in terms of the council. And Reform came from nowhere, and they won the most number of seats, council seats, but not enough for a majority. And they actually weren't able to form. They spent ages trying to form a council, but they couldn't find anyone to work with, right? No one would work with them. And surprise. And so the Lib Dems partnered, I think, with various independents, and they have been kind of running the show. In just 5 or 6 months, despite there being no actual council elections in that time, Reform have gone from having the most seats in Cornwall to now having the second most. They don't have the most anymore. The Lib Dems do. And again, it's literally just because they have had to get rid of five of their councillors have had to step down or been suspended because they are not fit to be in positions of power.
This is the exact point. People talk about the polls, and some of the polls are quite exciting, and obviously we've got quite excited on this channel without the popcorn, but genuinely excited. You look at some of the numbers, and let's assume for a second that we've had a general election and Reform win a majority of, let's give them Boris Johnson's majority, something that's very chunky, 80-seat majority, right? It wouldn't last. It wouldn't last because Reform win their 80 seats. You get to the second week where everyone goes down to Westminster and gets sworn in. They'll lose a decent number of MPs who had no idea that being an MP meant that you had to live and work in London, right? So just as we had councillors elected onto day council saying I had no idea that I had to attend meetings and then promptly resigning, you will lose some actual resigning as MPs. You're going to have other councillors who get suspended and expelled because, shock horror, they're massive racists. Who would have known, right? And the vetting hadn't shown it up, and then here's them dressed as Donald Trump, right? And then you're going to get a load of others where they say or do something which annoys the leadership, and then they get thrown out and expunged and moved out. So you are going to end up with, for a lot of these ones, they'll end up still sat as MPs, but just as independents. There'll be more factions than there are in a former Your Party meeting, because they've also just lost an MP from Your Party this week as well. So the crank left is already breaking itself into tiny, tiny pieces, but the crank right will do the same thing.
Yeah.
So this is it. And as we know from our collective experience of cranky politics, the very worst enemy are the traitors. And the best kind of traitors are the ones who have turncoated on you. So they are going to spend most of their time turning their fire on each other, as has always happened with Nigel Farage over the years. Look at all of the people that Farage has had to have manoeuvred out because they're seen as some kind of threat to him. There's a long list of former, leaders of UKIP, Brexit, whatever, and now Reform, where they've gone. And it would be the exact same thing. So that's not stability either. So we've got this chaos at the moment, but the answer to how do we get rid of chaos, the answer is not Reform.
Well, but in some ways, and I can't believe I'm going to stick up for Nigel Farage for a second. An apology and sticking up for Nigel Farage. It's like, what is going on today? You could say the same about Zach Polanski and the Green Party, right? They've been around for longer. He hasn't, but they've been around for longer. But again, in terms of an operation, to go from a relatively small operation where you don't have the keys to lots and lots of councils and you don't have lots of power to suddenly being in power is a huge, huge thing.
Yeah.
And I would imagine, let's say, in some unbelievable utopian paradise future of that I'm thinking of at the moment, that Zach Polanski continues on this road he's on and somehow becomes the next prime minister. I don't think it will happen, by the way, but let's say that did happen. I think it would be a utter chaos again, because they're not necessarily they don't have the experience to do this in the same way. And so that's me being nice to reform to a certain extent, because it isn't just about let's kick reform when they're on the way back down. But look at the SNP, right? The SNP did this. We have an example of this having happened in our lifetimes. The SNP went from, again, an established party, but a thorn in the side, to being in power. And just go and ask some of their former leaders how that went, because it's not gone so well. And I think, look, I don't necessarily feel sorry for Nigel Farage, because I really don't. But I do have like this smidgen of sympathy for the fact that it's really difficult for him. I can respect that this is actually really hard for him now, because he's got this party to a level where they could genuinely challenge for power, but he can't get over the hump. And it's not just because his own popularity ratings are terrible, but he doesn't have people around him that he can trust, or that he feels he can trust. I mean, that is a terrible position to be in. It's like, who's his chancellor going to be? No one knows.
Well, hang on. It's also, what are they proposing? Because this has been the big reveal with reform councils. They went in saying there's massive waste and corruption, and we're going to get rid of that. There's a fortune being spent on woke DEI shit, and we're going to get rid of all of that. And we are definitely going to be going out there and stopping all of this stuff that we absolutely know is going on, because of course it is. And they get into office and they find there's nothing left to cut because it's already been cut. The DEI office has never existed in the first place, and there's only so much money you can get away with saving on flags or whatever. So they're in the exact same place with the exact same problem of no budget and costs going up, having to then put in place things like doubling the council tax for second properties, which is directly contrary to reform policy. And this is the point, though. It's not just about reform. To pull back from them for a second. Does anybody actually have a plan at this moment?
No.
Does anybody have a plan?
No.
And I'm putting the Liberal Democrats on this one as well, because I think we're very good at pointing out where the problems are, but we're not necessarily going out with some of the bold solutions that are needed. Because aren't we at the point where fiddling around the edges isn't going to cut it? And we're going to find this out now with a budget that's already gone down in flames, and there's still a week and a half before they unveil the damn thing, where it's not going to do anything substantive, because when they've tried to even think about doing anything substantive, despite having a massive majority, their own party goes mad and it's not happening.
I mean, I'm glad we've kind of segued into the budget, because there was something I was thinking about this morning that is, it's bad when the leaks of what you might be doing and then reneging on, and then putting another leak out to say you're going to renege on that thing, damages the stock market, right? So the bond market, which we heard a lot about back in, what year was it?
2022.
Yeah, when Liz Truss did it. It was all about the bond market, right? And like people's pensions weren't going to, we're going to collapse and everything else. It's like because the bond market was collapsing and the Bank of England was having to step in to save the day and all this kind of stuff. The bond market took a massive hit yesterday or Friday, I think it was, because and it's clearly come from Number 11. Number 11 has leaked that Rachel Reeves plans to put a few points onto income tax. They're not going to do that anymore. So the market's gone, oh, where's the money going to come from? And the bond market has gone bad again. Or continued to go. It's already bad. So if that's what happens when we don't even know what's in the budget, what is going to happen in 2 weeks' time? It's like, it's a no-win scenario, and I do have a little bit of sympathy for them, but again, it's...
Hold on, what's going to happen before we even get to 2 weeks' time,
It-
right? We've got a lot, politically, we've got an eternity to go before the budget a week on Wednesday. Anything could happen and probably will.
But I do think this is a part of the problem of constant briefing the press, right? We've seen Keir Starmer's team brief the press about, don't come for Keir Starmer's job. He'll have you out the back, and he'll fight
The donkey on you.
That's gone down badly. We've got number 11 and the Treasury briefing the press about what I keep saying Rachel Reeves might do, but then might not do, and that's damaging the markets. How about you all just stop briefing and just get us to the budget and let's see, and let the chips fall where they may?
They don't have a clue what to do because they are stuck. We've said bad things about the Treasury orthodoxy and things before, but they are stuck in the place of being basically told things are very bad. You've got to cut, but you can't cut. You've got to raise taxes, but you can't raise taxes, and you've got to manage the politics of it, which is how they're in this ridiculous place of trying to find a way of raising money without costing money and doing it without costing any votes. And it's like, that isn't the focus. They're doing party management. They're trying to stave off a leadership and save Rachel Reeves' job management. What they need to be doing is saying, look, we're in an absolute hole. What's the direction of travel and what we're trying to do? And you said there's no alternatives to this. Well, the obvious name, right, because there's not going to be a general election before 2029. It's just that simple. There will not be a general election.
Yeah, unless they're very stupid.
Not unless they're insane.
Yeah.
We're stuck with this for the next 3.5 years. So the alternative has to be from within the Labour Party. And I don't think that it is within the current parliamentary party because the name that I go back to is Andy Burnham. And I've talked in the past about the Manchester miracle. And most of that isn't Andy Burnham's doing. No. He's been the mayor up there for less than a decade, and the Manchester thing has started much earlier than that. But if you want an example of what to do, it is Manchester. Yeah. And it's getting the basics right. So let's have the streets clean and let's make it look like people are actually doing normal things without it looking like so many towns and cities and things now where the shops are shut, there's grass growing out the cracks, there's big potholes. Manchester had a blitz of all of that kind of stuff, but it also invested. We're going to borrow and we're going to invest and we're going to create growth, and that's going to drive more investment. And then it's the whole virtuous circle thing. You said about apologising to Farage earlier. I almost feel sorry for Liz Truss because apart from the fact that she is bonkers, again, Liz Truss was right that we need to find a way of driving growth. It's just that her plan was bonkers. It's the whole, how do we get the economy jump started again? Because it basically died in the global financial crisis and it's never really managed to restart. And Brexit's made it worse and COVID's made it worse and all of these other things. But if you look back at the divergence point of the UK economy versus the EU, it's them. Right? We had a heart attack because we were further in than they were. We've never managed to restart things. So we've got to do something different. And the tragedy of this, of course, is that he who wields the sword never wins the crown. So Burnham he's probably egging on Wes Streeting and saying, Wes, can you do this for me, please? Because it creates an opening for Burnham to be the Prime Minister after Wes Streeting or after Angela Rayner, because there's no way he can get it now. But somebody needs to do something. Yeah,
I think that's really, really well put. And this is the why it doesn't matter how many times Nigel Farage or anyone bleats about he'll have a general election in 2027. It's like, no, you won't. Not unless the only way you get a general election in 2027 is if you defect to Labour, become the leader of the Labour Party, and then call a general election. That's the only way you're getting a general election in 2027, mate. Okay, but you talk about what to do, what to do in a budget and things like this. Part of the problem when you talk about challenging the Treasury orthodoxy, right, is the only way you can't do that in a drip fashion. You can't do it by having a budget and saying, well, we're going to do this, because the reason the market gets spooked is because there's no plan. Yep. If it's part of a joined up plan, don't get me wrong, the markets can still, if you start saying we're gonna borrow a whole load of money to invest, the market will still have a wobble, but it won't have as big a wobble, and it may not even have a wobble at all, if it's part of a collected plan. It's like, this is our vision of what we're going to do for the country. You know, you mentioned Manchester. You take that to the whole country and you say, hey, it's going to cost money. It is.
Yep.
We're going to have to borrow a lot of that money, but we're going to pay it back very, very quickly because of the jobs we're going to create. And we're going to create those jobs because we're investing in, whether it's building houses or renewing the rail network or building hospitals. We're still waiting for those, Boris. But, you know, all of that. But unfortunately, there is no way in the world that Rachel Reeves, yes, I got it right this time, that Rachel Reeves is going to stand at the dispatch box in a couple of weeks' time and throw it all out and say, me and Keir have got this amazing new vision we've got for the country, trust us, we're going to invest all this. They're just not going to do it. They're just going to raise taxes. And it may not be income tax or national insurance, but they will raise taxes anywhere else that they can find.
I think we should put a tax on people with moustaches.
Oh, I'm all for that. I mean, I can barely grow one, so I mean, I'm set for life. That's all
But
good.
you're right. There's going to be fiddling around the edges, and it won't be enough. On the borrowing thing, our problem isn't the amount that we borrowed. Yes, the national debt is your painful levels, but compared to some of our competitors in the G7, actually it's not anywhere near as bad as some of the other countries, and they're still able to function with higher levels of debt. The problem we have is that we seem to be borrowing for day-to-day spending rather than investments. Yeah. And this, if you remember, going way back when, was Gordon Brown's golden rule that, you know, you balance the books within a period and you're not borrowing for day-to-day, you're only borrowing to invest. If I've remembered that right, I'm sure I have. It was the borrow to invest bit. Yeah. But we don't do that. Again, I think as a country we've largely stopped investing, and this is the real problem that we've now got. They're going to have another week and a half of probable chaos with the markets expecting whatever, and I absolutely guarantee that when we do our budget show, as we said we're going to do, we'll get to the end of the budget and the collective response from everybody is going to be, is that it? Is that all you've got? Because it'll be a tax on sticking plasters. Yeah. Right. It
reminds me so much of, and this is where the media plays a terrible part in this as well, because they want to big every single thing up so much because they've got a 24-hour news cycle that they've got to feed, and they need views and clicks and all that kind of stuff. By the way, like and subscribe, guys. But I think...
Seamless.
Yeah, there you go. What can I say? It's the wine. We have this situation where it reminds me a lot of David Cameron negotiating with the EU. You know, remember when he went off to... and he was like, don't worry, guys. All the other EU leaders were literally like pinning him up against the wall going, are you mad? What are you doing having a referendum? It's going to end badly. He's like, it'll be fine. Just give me a little bit of something that I can take to the British people. And we're stable in our country. We don't do crazy things. It'll be fine. And of course, what he brought back was nothing on a piece of paper. Nothing. And everybody saw that and went, we're going to vote to leave. And it feels like that. You know, the budget's going to be bigged up and bigged up and bigged up, including by us. And it's going to be, they've frozen the tax on beer again, you know, and it's like, aren't they lovely? They're helping people who want to have a drink down the pub. Aren't they really nice to working people? It's so false.
Irrelevant.
And irrelevant, exactly. You know, that's the word. It just, there needs to be you got to change the fundamentals and not be afraid of debt. Look, why are we so petrified of being in debt when for the vast majority of Britain's existence it has been in debt? You know, it's very rare that you're actually not in debt as a country.
No, but the entire global financial system is designed around debt that is never repaid.
Yeah, totally.
That's literally Everybody runs around these days. Go and look at actual physical currency. If you've got some in your pocket, right? Pull the thing out. I promise to pay the bearer. It's a promissory note. It's fiat currency. It's valueless, other than the value that's assigned to it by the government that's issued it. Yeah. It's, the money bit. It's a false narrative. They've got to go out there and say, how are they actually going to drive economic growth again? And look. Wanting to throw a few ideas into the table. Let's not do the irrelevant bits of, we're going to put tax on a pint of beer, or we're going to put a tax on moustaches. They're going to put a tax on all foreigners living abroad or something. Let's talk about some of the obvious biggies. We're at the point of we need to drive economic growth, but we've got the rather basic problem that for so many people, work doesn't pay their bills because the cost of living is so high. So there's an immediate, how can we pull that down? And there's two massive levers they can pull relatively painlessly. So just indulge me very briefly. The first one is decouple electricity prices from gas. Because at the moment, for all of the arguments about net zero or net stupid zero, as Stupid Reform put it, it's all about the fact that 98% of the time, I think the number is, we price electricity on the spot price of gas, where it goes to the gas-fired power station and switches the thing back on at the point of peak demand. They can charge anything they like. We don't store gas because the Tories allowed the gas companies to get rid of gas storage. So we're paying the crazy price for it, and that's why our electricity prices are higher than pretty much everybody else. And people say it's about net zero. Hang on a second. No. France, Germany, Spain, Italy, etc. all have their own net zero tariffs and yet pay far less than we do. Yeah. Why? Because they're not pricing on the price of gas, spot price 98% of the time. Spain decoupled its prices from gas. And by the way, the coupling bit is a mechanism created by the EU, which we did leave, so we could do something different. Yeah. Spain did it, and so a 25% reduction that then increased to a 40% reduction. So it's not just the price of your energy bill, it's the price of everything that you make. It's the price of this can of Coke, this bag of popcorn, all of it uses electricity. So you crash the price down by 25, 30%, and the price of everything comes down because the production cost is there. It's an absolute no-brainer. And yet Ed Miliband, who's supposed to be the intelligent one, is still saying, "Oh, we can't do that." Why?
Yeah,
why?
And why is the absolute? And this is the bit where, for me, I really wish we had a British political media that was like that. That Laura Kuenssberg on a Sunday would sit down and actually ask those kinds of questions, rather than do whatever she does right now, which is I'm sorry, but not very good. I'm sorry, soz Laura. But the electricity one always gets me because, I use Octopus. And their electricity is 100% renewable, right? Mm. That is what they do. That is their big thing. And yet their electricity price is linked. They have to set their electricity price to the market, which is driven by gas prices. Yep. It's insane. It's utter insanity that it's like that. And they have all things on their website apologizing for this kind of stuff. It's like, we're really sorry. It's like, but that unfortunately is the way it is. And they find other ways to kind of give you money back and what have you. But that is just a fraction, as you say, of where the money can be saved. Because if you're a business, your electricity costs are insane. If you're a factory, if you're a warehouse, if you're a logistics company, your electricity costs are through the roof. Imagine if you could slice those in half.
Absolutely.
What it would do to the economy.
It's also then planning for what do we do next. So we have gone fairly heavily into renewables. You get the strike price bandied around, which is the guaranteed price for renewables, for new wind farms. And the strike price is really high on some of these bids, and they're having to set it really high to guarantee that when they have to switch them off because there's no way of transmitting the power, that the company is still going to be able to make it a return back on its investment. The strike price comes down if we do two things. One, actually stick the new wires up that we need, which we have to do anyway, because guess what? After privatisation, not enough money was spent on basic maintenance. So there's a whole backlog of stuff. So let's go out there and aggressively go after it and just pay off the people who are complaining about pylons, right? And that won't make me very popular locally because there's been some protests on it, but there's an element of they got to go somewhere. You've already got one row of pylons, we're sticking another one, here's some cash. But the other part of it is, back in the day, right, you put industry next to where the power stations were. And the power stations have to be linked to a big river if you're doing coal-fired or whatever, because you need a whole load of water for the cooling towers. Well, these days, all of the power is coming mainly off renewables and off solar. So, all of these AI data centers and things that they're trying to build in Bletchley and places like that on this, arc of prosperity, how about building it up here? And I think I've said this before, but there's put a tax incentive in place to stick all of these mega power hungry places next to the places that have got more power than we can transmit. It kills two birds with one stone. Whatever the subsidy is, you're paying out more than that in switching the damn things off. Again, it's a no-brainer. And for the rest of it, nuclear is still going to be part of our solution. And instead of paying the Chinese government a gazillion pounds to very, 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 very slowly build a monolith thing that nobody else in the world is now building, Rolls-Royce has wanted to build these modular reactors. Well, let me give you an example. Your friend Nick Clegg, right? Or I suppose should be my friend Nick Clegg. Now, I'm the Lib Dem and you're not. But your friend Nick Clegg said no to the loan to Sheffield Forge Masters for the parts for the modular reactors back in 2010. And that killed the project for ages. Now we're back to the place of Rolls-Royce want to put their basically nuclear submarine modular reactor into a little building in lots of places and generate power. And they're saying they could have that operational, within 8 to 10 years. Well, let's speed that up and go quicker. But somebody needs to make a decision and get on with it, because as always with these things, they'll say, "Oh, we want to put a modular nuclear reactor at Wolver on Anglesey, right, in North Wales, where there was a nuclear power station previously," and they'll spend 6 years writing a report about birds.
Sorry, that just. It's very true. It's very true. I mean, look, that's part of the. And I will just say, okay, I might have agreed with Nick, in 2010. I don't agree with Nick. He's not my mate anymore. Okay, he's not my mate anymore. But a lot of this stuff is no-brainers, and I find myself debating with myself, because that's what we do when we get crazy and old age. I start debating with myself of have I just got it wrong here? Am I just oversimplifying? But then when you see that other countries have done this, I'm a big one for, we don't have to come up with the idea, right? Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves do not have to come up with all the big ideas if they're afraid of vision. They can just look at what other countries are doing and do that, if it works. Learn from the people around you and learn from the mistakes of the past. But like I said, I do not get, when it comes to things like electricity, I do not understand. And again, the thing about, modular nuclear and all that kind of stuff, for me, all of that goes back to something that's really been lost in Britain over many, many decades, which is the ability to do large infrastructure projects. We just do not know how to do it. We can mention HS2 and everything else, which was just an absolute joke. But every single time there is we've got this big project, the timeline becomes 30 years, by which time it's obsolete, and the cost is 10 times what it was originally quoted at, or worse. Again, we're not bad at that because we've just always been bad at it. We used to be great at infrastructure projects. Yeah. We co-built the Channel Tunnel, for crying out loud. It's like we can do this
early and to budget.
To budget, absolutely, early into budget. It was a phenomenal piece of engineering and a great example of project planning. Loads of other countries do this, and they do it really well. Learn from them. If we need to bring some people in to learn from them, then let's go do that. But
despite I've just slagged off the privatised energy sector because of the fact that they didn't invest any money. At the same time, we need less government and more private sector. Not with them out there trying to make a profit, but as contractors. Yeah. Because they're brilliant. Give them a brief and say, we're doing this. The reason why HS2, as you mentioned it, has gone absolutely gonzo crazy is because the government keep changing the brief. And then there's political interference. And we need a new 10-kilometre tunnel under this bit because an MP has threatened to resign, right? Or is threatening not to vote for Boris Johnson in the forthcoming. It's all of this kind of nonsense. Take all of that crud away because it's an arm's length next steps agency, I think. Next steps is the way that it's described in government. It's owned by the state, but it's run commercially, which is exactly what everybody else does with all of these things, right? And look, the big infrastructure that for me that we need to do is housing. I know we talked about housing and stuff in the past, but look, how can I put this? We're building all of the wrong houses really slowly. So we have got all of the private sector housing companies land banking. So they are buying the land, getting the planning permission, and then not building because they want to wait until the price they can sell their rat house for goes up to the maximum possible price, and then they'll actually go and they'll build it so that you'll buy off plan. And we've already sold all of these, and isn't that marvellous? The problem is they're building houses that people don't really want. They're buying them because there's nothing else, but a lot of them are buy-to-let things now anyway. And they're in the wrong places and they're done at the wrong time. So you're back to, let's actually get the local housing associations building houses and apartments. Because one of the success stories in Manchester is that having gone from this desolate hellhole of a city centre where it had like 500 people living in the middle of decay in the mid-90s. We're not going back to, post World War II or something. Mid-90s, I used to walk across the city centre on a Saturday night, and it was awful. And they've got tens of thousands of people there because they've gone out there and they've built apartments. So if private sector doesn't want to go out there and build it, then we've got to go and build it ourselves. And if you're doing it yourself, then you get a local housing association, give an automatic planning permission on any land that the council or the government own or can just be zoned. Click, done, go and build. They can borrow money at government rates. I know interest rates and things have gone up, but it's still a lot cheaper than commercial. And they're building apartments which are never for sale. And if they're never for sale, you don't need to worry about market rents, because it's a completely different thing. So suddenly you're flooding the market with apartments where rent is 50, 60% of where the market rate is now, which crashes the rentier class who've been mugging everybody off. And they then have to sell their properties, which floods them back onto the market. There is a correction, but we actually get people building. And the point of this is where you've got, younger people generally who are paying, what was the statistic you came up with ages back? Was it 60% or something? It's in that region, isn't it?
Yeah, it's around, it's around 50% or so. It goes on rent. Of the average that's the average salary, not like, like if you're a 21-year-old, you're probably not getting the average salary, right?
No. So you end up paying, that's where I've got like 60, 65.
Totally.
But the point is, that at the moment is money that's not circulating around the economy. It's not sat in your pocket. You're not going out spending it and going out and eating and drinking and buying stuff, right? All the stuff that young people want to do. They want to live. And they can't live because a significant proportion of their wages are going into the pockets of private sector landlords. And then it isn't circulating. So take it away from them. Cut rents, and then people have got money to go out there and buy stuff. And buying stuff creates jobs and opens businesses, and more investment comes into it. Again, it's not rocket science.
No.
It's not rocket science. Go back very briefly, and I will shut up. And I know this is my thing on this channel. I will shut up. But in the 1959 general election campaign, Harold Macmillan, Super Mac himself, the grandest of Tory grandee prime ministers, went around the country in their election campaign boasting about how many hundreds of thousands of council homes his Conservative government had built. Why were they doing it? Because they knew it was critical to economic growth.
Yeah.
Could we just go back to something like that, please?
Yeah, and look, genuinely, I think that is a really good example of the ideas. The ideas are there, right? And I was giggling to myself because you mentioned that you can tell we're from the same place, right? It's like, and we went to the same uni, because that walk between Manchester Piccadilly and Manchester Victoria back in the 90s, my mum and dad used to be like, I don't like the fact that you're walking that route late at night. Now
really?
people will be like, are you mad? It's like, it's brilliant round there. There's bars and restaurants, and it's gorgeous. Back then it was like, you had your keys, holding onto your keys in your pocket, and your bag. But look, the issue is around, I'll say, political will, right? People want to be in power, but they actually don't want to wield it. That is the genuine sense I have. Or they're afraid to wield it. Except for on the global stage. They love wielding power on the global. Boris Johnson loved his trips to Ukraine. Keir Starmer clearly quite likes his world statesman position, and he's pretty good at it. But domestically, they've handed everything over to the private sector. And you're right about the idea that we have to work in partnership with the private sector. The bit that we did wrong is that we literally just handed it over to them and said, do what you want. We didn't really regulate it. So again, working with private companies to do a major infrastructure project, for example, or to build houses is completely okay. But we have to have really strict guide rails around it to say, however, this is what you have to do. And you cannot deviate from the plan of what we want to do. And we will help you make it happen. And you will get loads of money for your shareholders in doing that.
You mentioned local. You mentioned about local councillors not having a clue what they're doing. And we gave some examples earlier. When I lived in Stockton-on-Tees, you had the ridiculous situation where the council wasn't building enough houses to make the government happy according to the legislation that had been put in, despite the fact that there was planning permission granted for far more than they would need to be above the threshold. But they couldn't get the developers who had the planning permission to build them. So instead, the developers are then putting in the dodgy schemes that the council doesn't want to do. But because the council isn't building enough houses because the developers won't build them, the law allowed the developers to overrule everybody. There was this one scheme in Stockton where the council opposed it, the MP opposed it, they even went to the Secretary of State who opposed it, and it went ahead anyway because of the law. Not because houses hadn't been approved permission, but just because the private sector were being arseholes. So what Labour could do is fairly straightforward. Say, right, okay, guys, as of now, you've got 6 months. If you haven't started building in 6 months from now on all the stuff that you've already got permission for, or 6 months from the point where you're giving it, then it lapses. Or the planning permission reverts back to the LHA. So it's basically get on with it. And what they'll end up doing is selling the land in a lot of these cases because they don't have the resources to be able to develop them to allow somebody else in to do it, right? It's not saying sack them. It's just saying get on with it.
Yeah. And look, I think, as we get ready to kind of wrap this up, I do think the one thing I would just say to that, because I can already see the objection, right? The obvious objection that you will get from the risk-averse politicians of our time is, but if we start doing that, the private companies just won't want to do business with us. Well, the thing is, number one, they will because they got wages to pay and they've got shareholders to appease.
What else are they going to do?
Yeah, exactly. What else are they going to do? And number two, as a government, you may not have the kind of power that governments had 100 years ago, but you do have various levers you can pull. We've got a budget coming up. You can do things like, hey, there can be preferential tax rates for companies that are a part of these schemes. There can be all kinds of, whether that's on kind of business rates or whether that's also on things like national insurance and all that kind of stuff. There are things you can do to make it appealing. Trust me, those businesses will come because they're raging right now about their taxes, just like everybody else is. So, look, I think genuinely, I think there's some really, really strong ideas in there. I think I've not brought any to the table, partially because I think you've outdone me already. Because I think that those two key things around electricity and housing, they don't solve all the problems in the country right now, but they go a long way to making people's lives better. And again, if Keir Starmer wants to stay in power, it's pointless to even say because he's not. But if there was a magical world where he could, and he wants to get to the next election and be able to say to the British people, see, your lives have got better. Yeah. That is an example of how he does it. And it's not as hard as it makes it sound. It's certainly not as hard as saying we're going to grow the economy somehow, which is the current plan. We're just going to grow the economy. Well, you've not managed to do it yet. And none of your plans seem to be working.
If you remember, I know it's slightly before either of us were paying that much attention, the 1992 general election that John Major won, which nobody really expected him to win. One of the slogans that they used was, yes, it hurt, yes, it worked. And they were talking about the fact that they'd had a big recession in, 89, 90, and they'd come off the back of it, and then they turned the economy around, and genuinely you got into that election and the turnaround was clear. People will accept hard times and bits of punishment if they think it's going in the right direction. And the problem we have at the moment is it almost doesn't matter which party ends up in government, but we've had prime minister after prime minister and budget after budget where things are getting tougher and worse at the same time, and there's no direction. But unless that changes, people are very prone to being attracted by, the Pied Piper of Brexit, who also has no ideas. We'll have a pint at the pub with him.
Yeah. And look, and I've mentioned the interest of balance a few times, and this is the reason why I mentioned Zach Polanski and the Green Party. It's the same there as well, because Labour are being obviously hammered by the Greens right now. If you want to avoid the Greens, if you want all those people running to the Green Party to come back to you, they will. They absolutely will if you offer them something. Offer them something that is hopeful, but isn't just saying, make Britain great again. right? Something with substance, and then they will. And if they start to see it again, you mentioned, to kind of close the loop on this, you mentioned there's a general election in 2029. It is still quite a distance away. If in a year's time it's still not going great, but they're on that road, there's a plan, they can weather it out. But if in 3 years' time the economy has massively improved, electricity prices are down significantly, businesses are not just operating, but they're growing because they can afford to do so, because they're not spending their entire monthly budget just lighting the shop floor, then people will respond to that. Again, John Major's a really good example of that. They had been in power for what, 13 years at that point?
Yeah.
And they were not well liked at all. And John Major was seen as this, again, boring, kind of ineffectual guy. They smashed it. They absolutely smashed a very, very popular and resurgent Labour Party. It can happen. I'm afraid to say it's probably too late for Keir Starmer, but it could happen for another one of those Labour leaders that comes in if they've got that kind of nous.
And look, while we're talking about past prime ministers and elections, I keep seeing Labour people pushing the list. Here are all your people saying we're not doing anything. Here's all the things that we're doing. You see Wes Streeting in interviews getting quite animated about the fact that we're doing all these amazing things and we're not getting any credit for them. And I saw an infographic that had the list, but they're talking about, again, breakfast clubs and things like that. Or we've now got, we said we'd have 1 million more GP appointments, we've now got 3 million more. Great, but you haven't fixed any of the rest of it downstream. So I can now see a GP, great, and that gets me slightly faster onto the endless waiting list, and I'm still here in pain. I don't feel any better off. Okay, so we've got a kids' breakfast club, but the school is still saying, can we please help them out because they can't afford to switch the lights on or whatever. I don't feel any better off. It reminds me of, and I actually went and looked it up yesterday, because this is the level of sad that I am, the dying days, and it is days, of Liz Truss, where she was trying to defend her embryonic government just after she'd sacked Kwasi Kwarteng and put Jeremy Hunt in, saying, look, we delivered the winter price cap, right, and we're gonna see down these communist unions. And I watched the last Prime Minister's question she did the day before she had to quit, and she literally keeps repeating the same very small number of things over and over again, because that's all she had. And Labour's list is longer, but it still feels just as irrelevant. It's like, is that all you've got? Yeah. Is that really all you've done? Because none of those things really matter materially.
I mean, look, Liz, I remember Liz doing that.
Bless her.
I remember at the time just going, hold on a minute, mate. It's like, you've not been in power that long. You've done very little. And the first 2 weeks of your time in power, you were on holiday because we were burying the Queen. So, but the other thing that it reminds me of is, and we will bring it to a close, that I think is, it's the toolmaker thing, right? It's like, it's Keir Starmer continually repeating that his dad was a toolmaker. So much so that he even makes a joke of it now. I hear you've heard about what my dad did. Some of you might know. It's like, it's not funny anymore, Keir. It wasn't funny 3 years ago, and it's still not funny now. It's the same thing. It's this. And it is a problem with modern politics, you've got to repeat. You've got to continually repeat the thing that you've done really well. The problem is, if you're having to repeat this really small list of things, then guess what? You've not done that much. You think about look, I was a massive critic of the Labour government, of Tony Blair, but what they did they did quite a lot in their first 100 days. And in their first year and 2 years, they really did a lot. Yep. Whether you agree with it or not, they did some good things and some bad things, but they did a lot. Alistair Campbell still goes around saying he wishes they'd done more. He actually thinks they could have done more but they were still celebrating a bit too much with the champagne. But they still did a lot more than this current Labour government has done, and that is the problem. Sod your list. Talk about how you're going to make people's lives better, how you're actually going to make it happen.
So what we then need to do as we wrap this up is to pose the question, which of the Labour contenders can turn things around for Labour? Is it Andy Burnham? Is it Angela Rayner? Is it, hell, let's go for it, is it Liz Truss? Come on, Liz, go and join Labour.
Join the Labour Party and become PM. Why not? Yeah. come and tell us. Come and tell us. You know, we always say tell us why we're wrong, but also come and talk to us about, you know, do you genuinely think that there is somebody in the Labour Party, either the parliamentary party or one of those mayors that they've got, like Andy Burnham, who could turn that sinking ship, well, not turn a sinking ship around, stop the ship from sinking and then turn it around? Come and tell us. Like, subscribe. You know, we love doing these, and we're very much looking forward to the budget, even though I think it is probably going to be a damp squib.
I will have a bigger pack of popcorn.
I'm going to invest. I'm going to have some popcorn. I won't have wine, I promise. I'll get
No.
a beer out.
No. But hold on a second. That's actually a good idea. And maybe actually we save it not for the budget, but for like we do a Christmas one or something. There needs to be, right, almost like an ask us anything thing where basically we just get trolleyed.
Let's do it because we are not currently sitting in positions of power. So absolutely, I think it's a great idea. Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Bailey. As always, keep growing that mustache. We'll come up with a new name for you on the next one. Yeah, we will see you all soon.
We will see you then.
Bye bye.